we might as well get started, eh?
Sure.
Okay. So thank you everybody for coming. I think I know everybody here, which is nice. My name's Lisa and I'm one of the student advisors here. And so I don't know that any of you will probably have questions about the center. Oh, and this is Carol, our director. So we just want to welcome you to the speaker series, and we're going to get started, and we'll try to finish just before 1 in case people have to be somewhere by 1 o'clock. And we have Laurie Ness Gordon with us here today, as you all know. We're very happy to have you here. She has a history of being a teacher and a consultant and a principal, and has added author to her list of persona. And so she's here today to talk about that journey and to talk about her book. And so thank you for coming.
Thank you, Lisa. I think I made it a little awkward for Lisa because she thought I was going to sit down here and present. But I grew up in Montreal and I speak with my hands, and when I have a drum in front of me, I move around with the drum. So I'm not going to oblige her by sitting down. So thank you all for coming. I was really delighted to come here today, and as I was preparing, I looked back over the journey that I've taken from a drum to a novel, and it was a 12-year journey, and it was really fun to revisit some of those memories. Now, the drum came into the picture in 2003, and that's when I retired and moved to Desert Lake, which is just north of here from Richmond Hill. I really enjoyed my job as a teacher and a principal, but I viewed retirement as an opportunity to try other things that I really hadn't had time for when I worked full-time and raised a family. And it turned out drumming was one of those things. My good friend Ruth had discovered that in Kingston there was a women's drum circle that played African-style drums, like this drum in front of me. Well, we'd never drummed before, didn't know anything about drumming, but it sounded like fun, so we were retired, we had the time, why not? So off we trundled on a Monday night, and for 2 sessions we used the borrowed drums, we borrowed drums that were available at the time, and after 2 weeks we were totally hooked, and we bought our own djembes. So this baby is my first drum that I bought, my djembe, and I took it with me every second Monday from September until June. So in the 2 hours we were together, we learned new drum rhythms, and we added bells and shakers and claves, and it was so energizing. It was really wonderful. Now, drumming is a total workout. Obviously there's a physicality to drumming, but also there's a mental part to it as well, because it takes concentration to learn new rhythms. And to sustain those rhythms when you have the counterpoint of 3 or 4 other rhythms as well. But we found it so stimulating. It was wonderful. In fact, 8 of us were so keen that we decided to form our own little subgroup, and we called ourselves Ajoa, which is a Ghanaian dialect born on Monday. So we met on the off weeks to practice our drumming together. And in the summertime, we even went down to the gazebo down at the park, at McDonald Park, I think it is, by the hospital. And we jammed on Monday nights until the sun set. And we would bring other drums and percussion instruments in case passersby wanted to join in the fun. Now, at the end of that first year, we found out that there was a women's drum camp that was going to be held in the middle of June, and at that time it was just outside Ottawa. Well, great, more opportunities to drum. A bunch of us signed up. It was 3 days full of workshops for African style drumming, Mid-Eastern drumming, frame drums, Aboriginal style drums. There was even belly dancing if you wanted to do that. It was a wonderful 3 days full of workshops of singing and dancing and drumming, obviously. And that drum camp was a pivotal time for me. And it had absolutely nothing to do with drumming. So I'm going to take my djembe off at the moment, and then go on with why that experience was so pivotal for me. I'm lucky I can find maybe not. Okay. It was pivotal because of someone I met at drum camp. Her name was Cheryl Ann Webster, and she was an artist and a self-proclaimed terrible drummer. But she hadn't come to drum camp to drum. She had come for an entirely different reason. She had come because the organizers had given her permission to offer the opportunity to all the participants to be part of her sculptural exhibition that she called the Beautiful Women Project. Now, at the opening ceremonies, she told us a little bit about the Beautiful Women Project, how it had been inspired by her daughter, who was very focused on her appearance. And she got the ideas for what she should look like from the media. Well, we all know that those women in the media are photoshopped, airbrushed, computer-enhanced images designed to sell either a product or a service. And Cheryl Ann was thinking, you know, there's nowhere that young girls, or any of us for that matter, can actually see what real women look like. So she had this idea. She wanted to create an exhibition of 100 clay torsos of real women. She wanted to show that we come in all ages, all sizes, all shapes, and we're beautiful just as we are. So her goal was to promote self-acceptance. Well, the members of the drum camp so endorsed her vision that dozens of women signed up to be cast. So even if Cheryl Ann had wanted to drum, she would have had no time to do so, because from before breakfast in the morning until into the wee hours of the night, she was casting these women for the Beautiful Women Project. And over the 3 days, she couldn't even cast all who were interested in participating. Now, as it turned out, some of the women who just couldn't be cast because of time restrictions were from this area. So they made Cheryl Ann a deal. They said, if you come to Kingston to cast us, we'll make it worth your while, and we'll get more people, more women, to participate in your project. She agreed. And I said, well, if you need someplace to stay, I live not too far away, you're welcome to stay at my place. So in September, Cheryl Ann drove down from Ottawa to cast these women. When she came back that first night, she was covered in plaster. It was 11:45 at night, and she was exhausted. And she got up the next morning, and off she went again. And while she was at our place, I found out a little bit more about her project, where she was, what she planned to do, and how it was going for her so far, because as you can imagine, creating 100 life-size clay sculptures takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of resources. So I foolishly said, do you need any help? And she said, well, there are a number of things that I could use help with. And then she went on to list research galleries that are big enough, making submission packages to galleries, applying for funding sources, writing for the web, setting up speaking engagements, finding a source of clay for 100 sculptures, deciding where she was going to actually store 100 casts and 100 sculptures when she was finished. The list went on and on. And I said, well, if you had to pick something that was critical, what would you pick? And she thought for a moment and she said, I need publicity. If people know about my project, people will get behind it, because that's exactly what had happened at drum camp and elsewhere. People, it really resonated with people that we should be accepting of ourselves and not trying to look like a model on the television or in movies. So I had been writing pretty successfully, and as a kid, I wrote stories and poems and letters, and I got good marks in essays and reports at school, and I'd done lots of writing in my career, so I said, well, I can help you with that. I'll write magazine articles and flog them to newspapers and so on, and get you the publicity you need. Oh, that's wonderful, she said. Terrific. So off she went to cast again. And I looked in the mirror and I thought, what the hell have you done, Laurie? Yes, you have a good background in grammar. 4 years of high school Latin gave me that. Yes, you have a degree in English and psychology, but writing an essay on Milton or Beowulf didn't exactly prepare you for a job in journalism. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was pretty panicked. Well, I didn't want to rescind my offer, so, well, I'm a teacher. What do teachers do? They take courses. So I enrolled in courses, several of them. Some of them day-long courses, some of them much longer than that, some of them in person, some of them online. And I started writing articles. Well, much to my amazement and delight, most of them were actually accepted for publication. So I brought a couple of examples with me. These are probably some of the better known magazines. Fusion is the magazine for the Clay and Glass Association. And the article in that focused on the actual production of the sculptures and all the technical details involved in that. So that was a very successful article there. And then another one, which is called Women and Environments International. This one had a story about the Beautiful Women Project focusing on using art as a medium for teaching and healing. Now there were many others too, but I just brought these two. Now I have to tell you that at the time I was writing these articles, I also got a job. My job was the volunteer project manager for the Beautiful Women Project. So all of those things that I mentioned earlier, guess what? They fell on my shoulders. Along with writing curriculum-based activities for teachers to take to schools, along with designing activities for visitors to the gallery to do while they were at the exhibition, along with liaising with organizations like the YWCA, who hosted the exhibition in various communities along with the art gallery, along with helping Cheryl Ann prepare for a day-long girls' conference or a mother-daughter event. So, needless to say, I was a little busy. And my husband, who always kids me about my need to be productive, had to make an appointment to see me and was getting a little frustrated with the whole thing. But I was having a ball. I was learning a whole lot about the world of art that I hadn't known about at all before. I was actually using my skills from my career in a completely new way, but they totally fit. So I thought it was wonderful. Now, at the same time I was doing this, an idea was percolating in my little brain. I've always loved books. I've got at least 2 on the go at all times. And truth be told, I've always harbored this secret ambition to write a book myself. So, 2 things encouraged me to actually embark on this much more ambitious endeavor. One was the success of articles for the Beautiful Women Project. The other had to do with this fellow right here. This is my late father-in-law, Vern Charbonneau. He lived with us for a few years until he was 91 and had to be in a wheelchair, and we could no longer take care of him. So when he was 91, he moved into a long-term care facility. He was a wonderful man. He was a career soldier. He had lots of friends of all different ages. He had a really great sense of humor, and his mind was sharp till the very end. He had lots of memories that I didn't think should be lost. So when I went to visit him at Fairmount Home, I took a tape recorder and I recorded him talking about some of the things that had happened to him during the war, and also just anecdotes about his life in Kingston, where he was born and raised. Now, my initial plan for this was to burn a CD and transcribe what he had said, and this was going to be for my children and my grandchildren. But then I had another idea. I thought, okay, what if I actually take some of those stories and incorporate them into a novel? Well, this is that novel. The Medal is a coming-of-age story, takes place here in Kingston and in Afghanistan. There are two main characters. The first one is Killian Barker. He's a troubled 16-year-old in the foster care system. The second, Harry, is a 92-year-old war veteran living in a nursing home. You'll never guess who inspired that character. Of course, it was my father-in-law. And in fact, if you look on the dedication page, you'll see there's a picture of him in his army uniform, taken in 1943. Now, if you look at my website, which is laurienessgordon.com, you'll see the phrase, where fact meets fiction. And this book really exemplifies that, because all of the stories that Harry shares with Killian that are woven through it, the narrative, are actually true to my father-in-law's experiences. So that was a pretty interesting thing to do, and one that my husband, his son, and my sons and grandsons really appreciated. So, okay. So I've told you a little bit about Killian and about Harry, but let me introduce them to you as they appear in the book. I'll read a couple of chapters and then make a few closing remarks, and then if you have any questions about my journey, I'd be happy to answer them, or if you'd like a copy of the book, I can provide those too. You can save the tax of buying them from Novel Idea. Now, you'll have to keep in mind that this book is written from the first person point of view, and it's Killian's point of view. So you'll have to just pretend that I'm a teenage boy. The Medal, Chapter 1. I lowered my front window and jammed my ball cap down on my head. My hands were sweaty on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. It wasn't the weather. April wasn't that warm yet. More likely, my illegal ride. I wasn't supposed to be driving this baby until it was safety checked and the registration transferred to my name. But who could resist taking this little Mustang out for just one spin first? Besides, what my foster parents didn't know wouldn't hurt them or me. My left knee bounced impatiently. The van ahead was moving at turtle speed. Finally, it turned off. I hit the gas and felt the power of the 5-liter engine. Man, this is living. Too bad I didn't invite Haley along. I pictured her grinning face. The cars behind me sped up too, but they couldn't keep up with my red rocket. Finally, freedom! I accelerated past an intersection. Shit! A police cruiser was pulling up to the stop sign. My speedometer read just over 110. If I slowed down now, the cop would pull me over for sure. I'd had enough trouble convincing the Sullivans and my social worker I was responsible enough to buy this car. They'd never believe me if I got a speeding ticket. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart racing. The cop had turned my way, but there were several cars between us. I was rapidly gaining on a hay wagon lumbering along the road. There was a hill and a turn beyond that. I'd be crazy to pass, but I had no choice. I punched my foot to the floor. The engine roared as I pulled out. A parade of cars was coming straight at me. I screamed past the hay wagon and cranked the wheel to the right, barely missing the tractor as the lead car coming at me took to the other shoulder. The blare of horns and the smell of brakes filled the air, but I kept on up the hill. Once the cruiser passed the hay wagon, he'd get me for sure on the straight stretch of road up ahead. I heard the siren. The cars behind me would pull over to let the cop by. I slammed on the brake, took a sharp left by the big Fairmount home sign and raced for the parking lot behind the building. At least I'd be out of sight of the road. I backed in between two other cars. Scrunching low in my seat, I peered around to see if anyone had followed. Nobody so far. I took a couple of deep breaths, planning my next move. Better get out of the car. I eased open the door and made sure the coast was clear before making a dash for the shrubs near the building. Maybe Fairmount Home was a lucky break. Old geezers probably wouldn't even remember I was there, let alone be able to give a description. A bunch of women were chatting under a covered patio by the side entrance. Two of them butted out their smokes and headed for the door. One called to me in a sort of sing-song voice. "I'll let you in here if you want. It'll save you going all the way around to the front." "Sure, thanks." I pulled my ball cap lower. One of them ran her pass by the electronic reader and pushed the door open. The other held it for me. The name tag clipped to her uniform said, "Joanne." I thanked her and followed the two inside. Down the hall to the left, there were some vending machines and a pool table and what looked like a darkened auditorium. Could look suspicious if I headed there. The two women went through the doors to the right. The lock clicked behind them. No way was I going to get caught any place I couldn't get out of. Straight ahead was probably my best bet. Obviously, the main reception area, and beyond that, the residents' rooms. I tried to seem casual as I cased the place. A couple of old girls in armchairs by the fireplace smiled at me. I nodded a quick hello and glanced nervously the other way. The large windows by the main doors gave a good view of the front garden and the horse farm across the road. A man in a wheelchair was looking out. I followed his gaze and gasped. A police van. No, it was just an ambulance. I coughed to cover myself, but the receptionist behind the counter was busy talking into her headset as I walked by. A double doorway led to the rooms. A nurse, helping a man with a walker, came toward me down the hall. I headed the other way. The place smelled kind of weird, not like pee and antiseptic as I'd expected, more like the sweet pink cough syrup that Gramps used to give me. Beside each door were the resident's name and a glass case with pictures and personal stuff inside. Maybe they needed crap like that to help them recognize their own room. But how many could even remember which stuff was theirs? Did all old guys lose it? I couldn't picture Gramps like that. But then, he never had a chance to get old thanks to that goddamn drunk driver. I clenched my fist just thinking about him. A bunch of framed medals inside the next display case grabbed my attention. The guy in this room must have been in a war with a chest full like that. At that moment I heard the sing-song voice from a room down the hall. Out came one of the women who had let me in. She saw me standing by the display case. "Are you here to see Harry?" Yeah. Her name tag said Grace. "Are you family? I don't think I've seen you here before." I had to think fast. No, we were neighbors, but we moved away a while ago." "Well, come on in. I'm sure he'll be glad to see you." She took hold of my elbow and ushered me into the room. I barely had time to read the name outside his door. Harry Goddard. Inside the room was an old guy in a wheelchair reading a book. His black and white plaid shirt looked too tight for his belly, and a cane was propped beside his right knee. He had a full crop of silver hair. He set down his book and put his glasses in his shirt pocket. "Hi, Grace." He turned up his hearing aid, and he looked at me. "You're in luck today, Harry. Look who's come to see you. This young man says he used to be your neighbor. What's your name, hun?" "Killian." I figured I'd better play along. The guy probably didn't have much of a memory. I'd just tell him he'd forgotten me. "Hi, Mr. Goddard. Good to see you again." He stuck out his hand, and I shook it, but his answer surprised the hell out of me. "It's been a long time, son. How have you been? Have a seat." He pointed to the recliner next to his bed. "I'll leave you two to catch up. Can I get you a drink, coffee, tea, ginger ale?" Grace asked. Harry shook his head. No, I'm okay," I said. "All right, you two have a good visit. And Harry, you behave yourself." She wagged her finger at him and laughed as she headed down the hall. He craned his neck to make sure she had gone. Then he turned and looked at me. I was sweating like crazy. I'd better be going." I stood up. He grabbed his cane and rapped me across the knees. "Sit down." Chapter 2. "Before you go anywhere, you've got some explaining to do." The guy's stare drilled into me. "What do you mean?" "You know damn well what I mean. You come waltzing in here, a complete stranger, telling Grace you're my long-lost neighbor. I've never laid eyes on you before in my life." But you said you remembered me." "You mean I played along with your little charade?" I tensed. "But if you knew..." I didn't know what to make of this guy. Harry kind of snorted. "If I knew, you don't get to be 92 without figuring out a few things." Who was playing who? I was really suspicious of him now. Suddenly a scary notion flashed through my mind. What if he thinks I'm here to steal something? What if he calls the cops? Shit, what an idiot move to hide out here. I glanced around. My chances of escape weren't good. The old man still had his cane at the ready, and I didn't want him to cause a commotion or squeal to anyone about my con job. I figured my best bet was to humor him. "How come you didn't rat me out?" My question seemed to calm him a bit. He set down the cane, and his face looked more like it did when I arrived. "What's your name again?" He turned his ear towards me. "It's Killian." "Killian? Is that your real name, or is it bogus too?" "No, that's really my name." His silence made me squirm. "My mother made it up from a combination of her name and my dad's." "Is that right?" Harry eyed me skeptically. "The K-I-L is from Kilgore, my dad's last name, and the A-N comes from Carrie Ann. She said Killin didn't sound right, so she added an I in the middle and got Killian." Harry raised his eyebrows. "I know it's a weird name, what can I say? She was young when she had me." "Well, Killian, to answer your question, the reason I didn't rat you out, as you put it, is if you live in a place like this, there's not a lot of excitement. The women, they're nice, but unless you like activities, which I don't, there's not much to keep a body occupied. When you came in pretending to know me, I thought, here's something out of the ordinary. That's why I played along. And I was right. Even your name is interesting. Now, the way I figure it, you owe me. So you can pay me back by telling me your story." I was pretty slick at spinning lies. In the past few years, I'd done it often enough with my various foster parents and teachers to keep them from finding out what I'd really been up to. But somehow, I felt guilty spinning a tale to Harry. A cop was chasing me, so he deked around a hay wagon and pulled into the parking lot back there so he wouldn't catch me. I pointed to where I thought the car was and watched for his reaction. His face showed no shock or disapproval. "What did you do?" "Speeding." That was the truth. But not my only illegal activity, just my latest. "How old are you?" "I'll be 17 in September." Harry nodded and rubbed his chin. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. "Okay, if I ask you something?" "I suppose so." "Why do you have a cane when you're in a wheelchair?" Harry smiled and picked it up. I flinched, but he just reached out and tapped a small refrigerator on a table near the bathroom door. "That's for my beer, and what my grandson calls stinky cheese." I must have looked surprised because he added, "Yeah, we're allowed our own drinks. It's not a prison, you know." That was probably for my benefit, but I kept my mouth shut. I saved the beer for when my son comes to visit. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed that one of my beers was missing, so I called Bob thinking he might have had one, but he said no. So I kept my eye out and discovered it was one of the residents sneaking in and stealing my drinks. I complained to the director and she said she'd take care of it, but I've heard from the others that this fellow is still on the prowl. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. He made a slashing motion with his weapon. I'll teach him to keep his hands to himself. I couldn't help myself. I smiled at the thought of a 92-year-old in a wheelchair chasing some old beer thief down the hall to whack him with a cane. What a guy. Old? Yeah, but pretty sharp and feisty. Harry smiled too. I could see the glint of gold in some of his teeth. I wondered what they were worth. "Do you ever play pool?" Harry asked. "What?" "Pool. Do you ever play?" "Yeah. I've been known to shoot a few games with the guys." "Well, there's a pool table at the other end of the building. Maybe you'd like to come back another day and have a game with me." "Okay, sure." It was best to be agreeable. But I better get going now. This time, I waited for his permission before I got up. I did not want another taste of that cane. He nodded and stuck his hand out for the second time. I rose and shook it. "Good to meet you, Killian." "You too, sir." I couldn't remember the last time I called anyone sir, at least not sarcastically, but I wanted to keep this guy on side. He picked up on it too. "No need to be so formal. You can just call me Harry." "Okay. See ya, Harry." "Hope so." He raised his hand as I left the room. I waved back. So that's the introduction of Killian to Harry. And as you can see, Killian has a few preconceived notions as to what old people are like, an attitude that Harry very quickly dispels. In fact, as the back cover says, this accidental meeting blooms into a friendship that helps Killian deal with his criminal activity, a forbidden girlfriend, and brushes with the law. Now, a few months ago, I went on the Chapters Indigo website because you can purchase my book through Chapters Indigo or from Novel ID in Kingston, or of course from me. And I found a review, and it was a 5-star review written by somebody I didn't even know. I mean, how great is that? And this is what it said. "In Killian, Gordon has captured the essence of a turbulent teenage boy. The reader cheers for him, shakes her head at him, and in the end is struck by his perseverance and kindness. I highly recommend this book." And another reviewer says, "The medal has an important message about the supportive relationships between generations, and the ending will tug at your heartstrings." So there you have it, my journey from a drum to a novel. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them about any part of the journey. Before I forget, please sign the guest book if you have any comments that you would like to share. That would be appreciated too. And the book is $19.95, so for a $20 bill or a check, you can have your own copy, which I'd be glad to sign. But in any event, please sign the guest book. Any questions about any of that journey of mine?
Laurie, did you